Good morning. This is Professor Charles Jeffries here at Rainier Avenue Radio, and today we're going to talk about continue the series of Aristotle Was, Plagiarist, and we're going to focus on the movie Matrix. Can you hear me talking? Okay. I always think about the Matrix. I mean, it was one of the most one of my favorite movies because it has so many different elements to it. And also, it's extremely diverse. It comes back at diversity. You know, Africans, Black people. In terms of Arabs, you had Asians. You have different people being represented on there. But every time I watch The Matrix, I see something I didn't see before. Okay, so I entitled this particular episode, or what is the "Welcome to the Matrix," because that's kind of where we are right now. It's really interesting. He's talking about if you look at history of the rises and falls of empires. Go back to the Greeks, the Egyptians, even up to the Romans. You had a rise and you had a fall in the empires. Okay, and they reached their peak and they failed. And usually, following the fall of a great empire is usually followed up by a period of barbarism. Okay, and back to Europeans, they talk about the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Okay, and that's kind of what we have a possibility of going into today. This Trump administration is basically doing everything it can to push us into a dark ages and maybe convert this whole so-called capitalist system into a feudal system. Okay, but let's talk about the goals of woke. Okay, or the goals of the opposition woke. Oh, we're going to destroy wokeism. Woke is going to come to Florida and die. But let's talk about the opposite of woke. The opposite of woke is sleep. Okay, and that's where the parallels come in with the Matrix and where we are today. If you watch the Matrix, they basically took humans, use them as batteries because they figured, well, we can just take these humans, use them as batteries, pump them with dreams, and let them think they're living their lives. So the opposite of woke is sleep. So what they want to do is put you to sleep, feed you dreams, and then use you as batteries. And when I refer to batteries, sometimes symbolically, workers literally working themselves to death for the corporations and getting nothing from it. And that's where we are today. And so the anti-intellectualism, where you have the administration right now attacking Harvard and attacking all your higher educational institutions. But you think about higher education is the beacon of truth. Okay. And so now you're talking about we're going to basically punish people for peaceful protest. We're going to punish them for peaceful protests, and we're going to try to prevent them from boycotts. Okay, but at the same time, they're escalating the things that everybody's protesting against. You can't protest; it's illegal to protest. But then we're going to make it even worse, the things you're protesting against. So once again, they're trying to put you to sleep. Okay, you think about the people who talking about the demographics who voted against Trump. Like I said, were most college graduates, people with bachelor's degrees and higher, voted against Trump because they know to a certain extent what time it is. But the whole concept of keeping people ignorant, let's put them to sleep, pump them full of dreams. We're not going to teach history anymore. We're going to teach mythology, or even better yet, fairy tales. In other words, we're replacing history in these higher education institutions with fairy tales. Okay, but think about that concept. I know it's not true, but I'm doing it anyway. Could you show the first video?
Do we have a deal, Mr. Reagan?
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Think about that. Ignorance is bliss, and that's where we are today. You can't talk about the truth in class. We're going to take away DEI diversity, but we're also going to replace that with some made up form of history. We'll call it history, but it's actually fairy tales and mythology. But then ignorance is bliss. Okay. The governor of, and think about that in terms of the similarities between right-wing Christians and the Taliban. The Taliban, those are the bad guys that so supposed in Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, the Taliban and Christian conservatives. Okay, they both use religion as a weapon. They're both anti or misogynist, anti-female, or at least nothing else, control these women. Okay, and they also want to silence people who have opposing viewpoints. And on top of that, they want to force everybody to live according to their rules. Okay, and this is where George Carlin comes in. He's a comedian, but what he has to talk about is not necessarily funny unless you really stop and think about it. Because you believe this?
You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table to figure out how badly they get off by a system that threw them overboard 30 years ago. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly leadership jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it, all day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. That's what the owners count on. The fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue that's being jammed up their low side every day.
Think about that. Ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know anything. And once again, I keep reinforcing the idea of these attacks on higher education. I mean, Harvard, that's one of the top universities, and he's trying to shut it down. We're going to basically try to control these people by jacking up removing their money. Okay, so in other words, Carlin's funny, but he's not really funny when you really stop and think about it. And most comedians are like that. On stage, they're funny, but deep down inside, they're extremely serious. Okay, but let's talk about media under control. Okay, in other words, talking about if you repeat a lie enough, people will believe it. I'll say that again. If you repeat a lie enough over time, people will believe it. You think about Fox News repeating this false information over and over, the whole thing, the way that January 6th situation went down. A lot of people should have gone to jail who didn't go to jail, and a lot of people were getting pardoned who should still be in that jail. Once again, the media control putting this information out, lie after lie after lie after lie. And the thing about it, when it comes to news and foreign policy, particularly around what's going on in the Middle East and Europe and places, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox News pretty much have the same viewpoint, particularly as it relates to Israel. In order to find what's really going on in the Middle East or Israel in particular or Gaza, you have to go to BBC, okay, or Al Jazeera for accurate information. Okay, once again, that brings us up to the whole idea of where we're going today. Tim Walz, he's the governor of Minnesota, and he also ran for vice president. And he's at a commencement. He's speaking here at a commencement ceremony. And this is a speech.
The court doesn't always get it right. Nixon's Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, he chose to step aside rather than follow through on a criminal president's unlawful order. Well, once again, in this pivotal moment in history, lawyers are our first and last line of defense. When you join the bar, you're going to swear an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution and the laws of your state and nation. Elected leaders like me take the same oath. So that means that no matter what we do or where we work, we share not only a moral duty, but a professional obligation to defend the rule of law. That's a pretty big deal. The rule of law is the foundation of pretty much everything we care about. It's what lets us settle our differences peacefully, makes it possible to start or grow a business, and empowers us to stand here and exchange ideas freely. Without the rule of law, everything else crumbles away. And that's where you all come in. Right now, more than any other time in my lifetime, we need you to live up to the oath that you're about to take. Because I have to be honest with you, you are graduating into a genuine emergency. Every single day, the President of the United States finds new ways to trample rights and undermine the rule of law. Now, I get it for some of you out there. Some would say, boy, it's getting way too political for a commencement address. But I would argue I wouldn't be honoring my oath if I didn't address this head on. And I'm going to start with the flashing red light. Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared. To be clear, there's no way for us to know whether they were actually criminals or not, because they refused to give them a trial. We're supposed to just take their word for it. And when duly elected members of Congress tried to exercise their constitutional right of oversight at an ICE facility, they get shoved around and threatened with arrest. And when courts told them repeatedly to knock it off, they brazenly defy them. Meanwhile, we have an aspiring fascist in Stephen Miller on TV talking about suspending habeas corpus. All of you know this. That's only used in times of rebellion or emergency, neither of which is happening right now. By the way, they're not only kicking out folks who are undocumented here, they're kicking out citizens. A few weeks ago, they kicked out 3 children, all under 8 years old. One of them had brain cancer, for Christ's sakes. It's not hyperbole to say we're not far from a world where anyone could get that knock at a door. And there's no guarantee you'd get your day in court or that you'd ever make it home alive from whatever corner of the world they stick you in. And then you have a vice president. When not getting chastised by various popes, he's offering up horrific arguments. Horrific arguments. It is his view that due process is optional. I don't know what the hell they teach at Yale, but the Constitution is pretty clear. It doesn't say only if it's convenient. It's crystal clear. Here's the thing. Due process isn't just lawyer speak. It's a right that stretches back centuries. It was wrested away from kings that heroes fought and died for. And we're just going to surrender it? Surrender it to Donald Trump, a guy whose only knowledge of the law is by being a criminal defendant himself.
Think about that in terms of where we are today. Okay, this guy's not a regular individual. This is the governor of Minnesota, and he also has a law degree. He's talking about this. Okay, and that's where some ignorance is bliss. And I said the difference between an ignorant person and a stupid person is a stupid person refuses to read. You're refusing to do research. And that's where a lot of these followers are. We're going to go along with this individual, but I don't have time to read or anything like that or go to school. We're going to shut down anybody who knows anything about this. And once we shut down opposition, we can do other things. Bruce Springsteen, this was really kind of hilarious when you stop and think about it. Bruce Springsteen got on stage in one of his performances and basically said some things Trump didn't like, and Trump was kind of accusing him of treason. Accusing him of treason just for saying something he didn't like on his stage. Okay. And if he had his way, you think about what could happen later on. Okay, so this guy is snowballing. His power is snowballing. And basically the judges seem to be pretty much in his back pocket. Every now and then disagreeing on things, but when important issues come up, he's so supported by the judges. And so in a way, he's using the court system to take over and become a dictator, or even better yet, become a king. Okay. But America is sick. America is sick. Okay. And you think about when you're sick, eventually you get worse and worse, and eventually you die. Okay. There's certain if you don't get treated properly. You show next video.
America is so sick that it elected a president with 34 felonies, but brothers who come home from jail can't get an apartment. America is so sick that Bruce Jenner, who won the decathlon in 1980, transitioned into a woman named Caitlyn, killed a woman with his car, and 4 months later was named Woman of the Year. America is sick. America is sick because they did not mind electing a narcissistic sociopath when they had the option to elect a qualified black woman and then think black women gonna come out and march with y'all March 4th. I wish we would. America is so sick, they are now trying to shut down the African American Museum at the Smithsonian because it makes them feel uncomfortable. How you think we feel watching everybody else get reparations? How you think it makes us feel still being judged by the color of our skin rather than the content of our character? How you think it makes us feel?
Wow, that's a powerful speaker. But think about that in terms of what is really going on. A felon, a convicted, and his opponent Harris was a lawyer, a prosecutor. So this guy's a felon, and people voted for him. And what it really came down to, and I mentioned one of the other videos, is white identity politics. Okay, particularly poor and uneducated European Americans. Okay, from West Virginia, Kentucky, and those other folks. And the crazy thing, they're voting against their self-interest. Okay, and so that's where we are today. Those are my history in general. They want to erase history and replace history with fairy tales. Okay, I remember history piece. People heard the phrase "history piece itself." History piece itself. History piece itself because we don't want to learn from it. Next one.
It's well known. It's a well-known issue that African Americans, black people in America, so-called, don't know their history. That they're cut off from the history of Africa, and even the history of everything that they did and everything that was done to them in America. That's why you have Black History Month, right? So this is something that everyone knows about. Everyone is aware of this issue. But the truth is that so-called white people don't know their history either. Their history in America or their history in Europe. Americans generally don't know history, which is incredibly useful when you consider the fact that history repeats itself. It's incredibly useful to keep the entire population in a state of amnesia so that the whole country operates like the main character in that film Memento, you know? So you keep doing the same things that you've always done, and you never understand that you're actually doing the things that history has already judged to be crimes. You understand? You can do it as if there's no context, as if there's no history, as if there's no pattern. That's the whole point of approaching current events from an ahistorical perspective. You don't want anyone to see the pattern. You want to be able to do things that have already been condemned by history, but you want to keep doing them anyway, as if you don't know that they're contemptible. You don't know that they are condemned actions. Just like Donald Trump now invoking the Alien Enemies Act in reference to mass deportations and so on. Okay, this is the same act that put tens of thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps in World War II, and for which the United States government eventually had to provide compensation and eventually had to even apologize for doing it. You see, it is something completely contemptible that you did, but you want to repeat it. So you forget your history. You forget history so you can repeat history without blame. Both so-called white people and so-called black people in America don't know their history. Both have been told lies about the past, about their respective pasts. And the only reason for that is for the purpose of maintaining the continuity of the contemptible reality of how that society operates. Amnesia and fictional histories serve as a preventative measure against change, against reform, against rehabilitation. America chooses to live like it's in the movie Groundhog Day. You know, you pretend that only today exists over and over and over again. And because of this forced amnesia, because of this deliberate suppression of historical awareness, the people in America don't even recognize when they're reliving their own past. They think that they're facing something new. They think that they're responding to some unprecedented crisis every time. If you have no recollection where the road leads that you're on, then you'll keep walking it again and again, never realizing that it has already led you into disaster after disaster, dozens of times before. And this is exactly the condition that the rulers in America want, that the elite of America want, not just for black people, not just for so-called white people, but for everyone. Because the most effective way to ensure that a crime continues is to make sure that it is never recognized as a crime. to make sure that every time you commit that crime, it feels like the first time. You know? So when Trump talks about invoking the Alien Enemies Act, most Americans don't hear the echoes of history from that. They don't hear the voices of the Japanese Americans who were dragged from their homes and put behind barbed wire for years and years. They don't remember that that country had to apologize for doing exactly what they're about to do again. The American mind resets every morning, and that's the perfect condition for those in power. Because if people really understood history, then they would recognize that nothing about the American system is accidental. Every aspect of it, from its racial hierarchies to its economic disparities to its unjust foreign policies, is simply the continuation of an old script, a script that has played out again and again, always leading to oppression, always leading to exploitation, always leading to war, always leading to misery. And this is why in America history isn't taught. Fiction is taught, legends are taught, myths are taught, but not history. Because real history would be dangerous. Real history would break the illusion and potentially break the cycle. So-called white people in America know a version of history. They know a story. They know a narrative that has been carefully crafted to shape how they see themselves, how they see their ancestors, how they see their nations and their place in the world, and how they see everyone else. And this ignorance, this deliberate miseducation that they have imposed upon their own people allows the same crimes to continue.
Think about that. History is really history, or is it history? Now we're talking about fairy tales. Nell Painter, she wrote a book called The History of White People. I recommend that you read this book, where she goes in back to Anglo-Saxons and forth, even talk about how they eventually came up with the concept of races. James Baldwin, he's a writer back in the 1960s, so 1950s, and comes up when talking about framing a position, or framing a particular attitude, or framing mentality. In other words, you set it up, a communication, whether it's a commercial or anything, for people to believe a certain thing. So slavery didn't exist according to the anti-diversity people. We're going to talk about Groundhog Day, face all over and over again. Okay, and that's kind of where we are today. We're going to erase history. Okay, and so Baldwin kind of deals with that, and so does Nicodemus. But in reality, what it really comes down to, I'm going to skip all over to video 9 and 10. And could you play them back to back?
Gillespie? Yeah. You saw it. I saw it. Well, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I'll remember that. There was a time when I could have had you shot.
But then we were able to develop a culture that is envied around the world. We were able to build institutions. We were able to build banks. We were able to build communities. We were able to build churches. We were able to build the White House that man sit in today. He spoke and said, why are you looking for the living amongst the walking dead? Because anytime you can deport a citizen and don't feel nothing, it's because you walking dead. Anytime you can threaten the IRS status of universities because they don't believe what you believe and they let their students exercise their First Amendment right, it's because you walking dead. Anytime you think you can sell Bibles and tennis shoes, sometimes God has to show up and refresh your expectation. Sometimes you have to tell yourself, this is not over. There is more to life than this. We're going to get past this. We're going to live through this. That this is not the worst that we've seen. That there is still better days. Is there anybody that ever had to talk themselves out of some things because the enemy was trying to make you believe it was over? But what I like about the women is they didn't let their trauma create paralysis. Because you do know the purpose of what is going on today is for the purpose of traumatizing us so that we end up paralyzed. You do know what is happening today is designed to make us so fearful that we won't know what to do. We won't act, we won't speak, we won't gather, we won't celebrate. But I need somebody who in deep East Oakland, not regular East Oakland, deep East Oakland, who know that when you from down here, you're not scared of nothing and nobody. I need a few people to understand that I'm not going to let anybody from the White House or anybody living in my house to keep me from being a witness on behalf of God.
Think about it, we've been through worse than this. That's the whole theme of there. Announcement: Juneteenth celebration, June 14th, Safeway on Rainier Beach Safeway from 1 to 4 p.m. I'm going to have Juneteenth celebration. And really good gives Safeway support because a lot of them have been closing down. The one in Federal Way has been closing down. Okay. And so back here, the whole, like I said, the whole idea, they're going to push us back in the second class citizen, create a permanent underclass, or that's the goal, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because too many people have gotten through. It's not going to happen because you do have outlets outside BBC and Al Jazeera, and you also do have professors now coming out protesting and even speaking out against these institutions, okay, because they understand the depths of what's really going on, okay, and that's kind of where we are today. And so, in conclusion, I first started out talking about the Matrix because, like I said, the Matrix is like I said, every time I watch it, I see something different. Every time I watch it, you see something different. Okay, and but you think about the mindset of the people who wrote that movie, or even the whole series of the movie. And like I said before, it's kind of prophetic when you stop and think about how what's going on today and what the authors and the people who wrote that movie we're talking about. And talking about the symbols, but also the literally, you know, where we're being put to sleep. And and the media, and particularly the Fox News media and all those folks talking about being sleep is good. Now we're going to go war against woke and make everybody sleep, okay, and basically turn this democracy into a kingship. But the thing is, it's too late. It's too late. Too many of us gotten through. Too much information is coming down. However, the battle still goes on. Okay, this is Charles Jeffries. Rainier Radio, appreciate your time, and go out there and read as much as you can and take on the world.